Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. Well, this week it's going to be the turn of the German musician, producer, film and television composer. It's the one and only Reinhold Heil, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in a lot of bands, including Spliff and also the Nina Hagen Band, and produced 99 Red Balloons by Nena, and also went on to do lots of film composing, soundtracks including Run Lola Run, Perfume, the story of a murderer, and also Cloud Atlas. There's a lot more besides, but anyway, you'll find out about that in this interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Reinhold, it's over to you.
I was born 10 years earlier than you, and also in the countryside, not too far from Frankfurt, but 54. That makes me basically a Beatles child, right? So Beatles, Stones, and as always, there's always this division of the audience. You either had to like the Stones or the Beatles. That was never a thing for me. I liked them both. Yes. I liked Prince and Michael Jackson. I like Brahms and Wagner, which, if you want to go further back to the 19th century, there were such things also, where you had to position yourself, so to speak. By the time the glam rock rolled around, I had already been infected with the jazz rock, more complicated, also the classic rock with the Nice, and then later Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but also Soft Machine, talking about Brits being very, very important in my upbringing. Of course, I was a huge fan of Cream, Brian Auger and the Trinity. This was all stuff that happened in the 60s already and then into the 70s. And so then when I was 19, I finally was able to leave home and move to Berlin, where I was accepted in the music academy, not as a composer, but as a classical music producer, which included, of course, music studies, but it also included technical stuff. So I went also to the technical university, and they educated me in the basics of electrical engineering, which all of this stuff I wasn't interested in. I did not want to be able to hold a soldering iron. I knew this. It also didn't. Then they offered you to do Fortran coding or something in the 70s already. And I said, no, I don't want anything to do with it. I want to be a musician. So from when I was 14, meaning 68, with the experience of things like Strawberry Fields, that as a single alone was like a transformative experience with this, what you can do in a recording studio. I literally had these weird daydreams that I would one day be in a band. We'd be on stage, play for thousands of people, and we'd be in the studio making this kind of crazy recording.
Yes, absolutely.
And my dad had a shop that was an electrical shop in a small town that had everything from the light bulb to the television set, washing machine, all the way to vinyl discs. And as I was becoming a teenager, I was the one who was dealing with the, buying the bulk of the vinyl discs. And my payment was that I could take the leftovers. And of course, I made it so that my favorite records would be leftover. And I started my record collection that way pretty early.
Yes, that's very smart, actually. Did you have any older brothers or sisters that gave you...
No, I was the oldest. I was the oldest of four, so the others had to suffer from me.
Yes, and what was the first concert gig you went to at this stage?
It was Deep Purple. I was 16. Somebody was able to give me a ride to Frankfurt, to near Frankfurt, in a relatively big concert hall. And we had a space that was kind of left top of the stage, and this is where John Lord,
yes,
the organist was standing. And of course, that was what interested me, being, wanting to be a keyboarder, playing the piano, actually having a small Hammond organ that my dad bought for me around that time. So that was pretty influential. There were some other bands. It was sort of a little bit of a festival. I think the Flock.
Right.
They're pretty obscure now. They were pretty cool. They had a violinist. It was very jammy. Stuff was very jammy back then in the day.
And you would have been that perfect age for prog rock, really, wouldn't you? You'd have,
Yeah. So of course, yes. Gentle Giant. Those were huge for me. Emerson, Lake and Palmer for sure. The Nice even before then, right? But I was already in high school. I was already listening to Soft Machine. It was fascinating me because it was different. It wasn't complex in this composed, arranged kind of way. And it was kind of more free floating and improvised and kind of, it was the pre-stage to when I came to Berlin. Of course, I went to the jazz clubs and I saw a band that was playing there that was already an established band. They didn't have a keyboarder. They had a violinist who was a Cambodian guy and three brothers on bass guitar and saxophone and the drummer. And they kind of educated me with things that went beyond Soft Machine, that came out of Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, which I had completely missed at age 15.
Right. So Miles, did Bill Evans come on your radar as well at this stage?
No. I mean, even Miles it was just all the electric stuff and the offspring of that, Weather Report, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Chick Corea. Of course, in terms of the acoustic stuff, Keith Jarrett actually plays on Bitches Brew. He plays electric piano, but of course he's more classical oriented jazzer, improviser. And Bill Evans much later, much later. Like, okay, can we just look at what else Miles has done before? I kind of I worked my way back. And of course, Herbie Hancock. I mean, very, very important, the Headhunters. Sort of the funky stuff. I always listened to soul music. Soul music was always huge for me, like even as a teenager. So the Motown stuff, Aretha Franklin, this kind of stuff. And glam rock, just to kind of come back to your question there, I was so totally above it. It absolutely did not interest me. I was like, that's like teeny bopper bullshit, right? And of course, also at this age when you don't have guidance and don't have people to take you by the hand and go like, hey, you should listen to this and this and this, and you're kind of by yourself in a way. You just have these mates that are just as stupid as you are, same age, right? Yeah. In school, my school band, it was a pianist, a drummer, and a guitarist and a bass player, and I played the Hammond. And of course, we were trying to do nice, but we also the nice. I mean, like in terms of Blue Rondo a la Turk in the Hammond organ version and stuff like that. But we were also already above everything and wrote our own music, which was absolutely horrendously awful. So I never went through the phase of really covering so much other music. And it is this time period where like 1 year, you're focusing on one thing, you think that's the shit, right? And everything else is crap. We don't like. And then the next year you found something else and you go like, oh, this is it. And everything that came before is also, again, it's been forgotten. And so, I bought a Fender Rhodes piano. I bought a Mini Moog, all with my work in during the summer breaks and stuff like that. And I brought that into this fusion jazz band that kind of really, really widened my horizon in terms of and we covered these kinds of things, but also did our own material and actually had a record deal. We did 2 albums. And then in 1977, I was also kind of slowly getting into the session musician thing. In 77, I get this call from a guitar player who I had kind of jammed with on a small project a few months before, and we had kind of liked each other, like each other's playing, and said, well, one of these days we should do something together. So he calls me up and says, hey, I was in this political rock theater group professionally playing, and they had to shut down because the funding went away. But we found this singer who just came from East Germany, and she already has a deal with CBS Records. Don't you want to join? Because we are like bass, guitar, drums, right? And you
Yes.
play keyboards, and I think you'd fit perfectly in there, he says. And I'm going, oh, I'm still in university, and I want to actually get my degree. My dad is kind of financing this, not on a large scale, but I want to be able to hand him the diploma because I had a great relationship with my dad. My dad was really, really supportive. So kind of it didn't feel right. So then he hangs up and calls me back 2 weeks later and says, we tried two other keyboard players. We don't, I still think you're the one. You should be doing it. Why don't you come and meet everybody and then we'll see. And so then I went there, I met everybody. Um, and we went to the rehearsal room and jammed, and they already had a little bit of material, and that was that. I realized if I don't do this, then I'm the stupidest idiot. I will regret it for the rest of my life because this singer is just absolutely out of this world. Good.
Yes, and there you go. And which
And
member
that
of the
was Nina
band?
Hagen. I mean, for the listeners, because they don't know who I'm talking
Yes,
about.
this is true, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
So which member of the band was that who
This was
persuaded?
Podge, the guitar player, Podge Podgka.
Right, Podpodcast. Yes, and just going back to your influences and musical moments. I mean, I know that Lemmy and David Bowie, Lemmy from Motorhead, they were both
Yeah.
born in 1967. Whenever they got asked about their musical moment, it was always Little Richard and Fats Domino, and then there
Right.
was Ray Charles. Did
Yeah,
you
because they're a
go?
little bit older. Yeah,
Did you go back to that kind of Little
well,
Richard
yeah. I
thinking?
mean, my as I said, my dad had this shop, and there were, of course, records being sold. And I heard, of course, I heard Bill Haley and the Comets, and this rockabilly '50s music. I remember one of the first pieces that I really, really fell in love with was "Pretty Woman" by Roy Orbison, which kind of
Nice.
still, if you want to say, is still kind of the outskirts of this era. It was '64. I actually looked it up. I thought wasn't I six, but that would have made it 1960, right? But
Yes.
no, I think it was '64, and this was sort of coinciding with the first Beatles album, the Beatles hits that came out, and all of this stuff was humongous for me. So
Yes.
that is where I come from originally, saying like this is the most important thing in my life, right? To listen to this kind of music and fantasize about, then a few years later, as I was um, dealing with it more intensely and listening to more music and having these weird daydreams of actually making this one of these days.
And you
And I
sort
never
of
told anybody. So I was not one of these manifesting Americans who said, "Yeah, you just have to tell everybody what you believe in and what your plan is, and then you will manifest your destiny." And you're like, "No, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to tell my parents or my siblings or even my bandmates. This was just for me. It was all happening inside, basically."
And did you finish your studies, by the way? Did
I
you get?
did. I had my last exam about 4 to 6 weeks after Nina Hagen already left the band because the band was really short-lived, right? So they started without me in the summer of '77. I joined them in that same time. Um, we had a record contract with CBS, which was mind-blowing, that
Well,
nobody
yes.
thought. Yeah, so I mean, we also had, because of the fact that there was this event where a famous singer-songwriter from the East, who was living in East Berlin, but was popular in West Germany, and had a deal with CBS, and he was like sort of a dissident, a little bit of a dissident. He would make these metaphoric, critical songs about and he was a socialist, but I don't think he really liked the communist regime in East Berlin so much. So, they of course knew this, and he went on a tour to West Germany, and they didn't let him back in. So they said, off you go. And then, like, the entire intelligentsia in East Germany, and there's a lot of that, fantastic writers, actors, musicians, everybody who was doing anything cultural wrote an open letter to the regime, basically to the government, and said, we want you to let this guy back in. So what happened was they didn't budge. They actually sent their Stasi people to each and every one of the people who had signed the letter and said to them, you either retract your signature from this letter or you will never be able to work here again. And so about 50% of these people retracted and stayed in East Germany and were privileged, artists there. Yeah. And the rest said, screw this. And they were all let go. So everybody was able to go, which of course, people were shot at trying to leave the East Germany, right? They were shot at the border, drowning in a river. Or, there's a whole bunch of people who lost their lives trying to escape East Germany. These people very privilegedly were just let go. And it was a massive brain drain of the GDR. Nina Hagen was kind of a singing star already there. Mm-hmm. Not huge. People in the West kind of had heard from her. But because of this story, there was so much attention that we as a band, as idiotic and sort of newbie we were, we had a ton. She basically brought a ton of attention. She was also this very, very charismatic singer, and her capability with the vocals were just out of this world, right? So we had everything together that actually made for a very, very steep success. And with the very steep success, of course, then
yes,
the disagreements happen, or then the bass player has a relationship with her, they live together. That's of course something that professionally one shouldn't be doing, but it has been done a million times. And not every time did the band fall apart. I'm just think about Blondie, right?
Yes, well, I was struggling to think of a band that didn't fall apart on that, but yes, Blondie was one.
Blondie would be a really good example for how it's done. It's properly done. Anyway, so and so here we are in 1979, and the lady, and we had already written the material for the second album. We had already tried it on a European tour, and we were basically ready to go to the studio and produce the album when she left and said, I want you to just be a backing band. And we had been a band, just like Blondie, right? We were a band, 5-piece band with a contract. And then there was this stupid legal situation where we kind of blackmailed everybody and said, we do not want to be in her way, but we have a few conditions if you want us to let her go, because there was a contract, right? Between us was a contract. It was solid. And so, we could have taken this to court, and then everybody would have been screwed by, a court procedure that was like 5 years long or something. So what we ended up doing was we said, we want this record to be produced because we already did all the work. All the songs are there. It's all arranged perfectly. And we want a record deal with CBS as a 4-piece band when she's gone. And we want to keep the publishing rights for the first 2 albums. And we got all that. And she went on her merry way. And we sat there in Berlin and went, oh, great. We had like a legal success. We came out of this. We weren't discarded. The record company really wanted to just put us in the trash and just kick us out.
Yes.
And because of this contract, we were able to kind of wiggle our way back in, or not be completely discarded. And so at the same time, we were like, what the hell are we going to do now, without this amazing front person? Yes. And so we started, using the word front pig for people in the front of a band. They were the front pigs. They were the enemy. And we were seriously traumatized by this whole thing. And we made a bit of something, I would say it's a rock opera. It was called the Spliff Radio Show. And that was in English language. And we spent about 2 years writing, developing, doing the album, doing a few tours with that.
Yes, my God, that's amazing. Just to describe what Berlin is like during your period there. I mean, because a lot of people I've interviewed from, say, New York, it all sounds very grim, amazing sort of poverty, lots of very
Yeah,
cheap housing, lots of cheap drugs, a couple of really good scenes and musically brilliant, isn't it? You got rap, you got disco, you got punk all happening, and the
right.
artistic world. But so, what's Berlin like during this kind of mid to late 70s?
Well, it's really dirty. There's a lot of like I don't think there's any different in the Western countries in Britain, like bad air pollution, or because we had like the East had all these coal power plants, and they
Yes.
were fired with surface mined coal, which is brown, we call it brown coal, which has a lot of sulfur in it. So there's bad pollution. It was, of course, cut off from the rest of Germany. They just artificially created the same conditions. They just passed all the laws, but it was officially really not part of West Germany. And it was sitting in the middle like a little island. It was sitting in the middle of the GDR. Russians could patrol this. Theoretically, if you were caught by military police of any of the occupying forces, that would be Russia, the US, Great Britain, and France, they could have just shot you right there.
Yes.
Legally that would have been totally fine. Nobody ever did that. So, and so there was definitely a lot of grit. There was also the fact that if you lived there, you did not have to go, you weren't drafted to the military.
Yes.
That was a
Handy.
big deal. And so all this gritty, underground, dirty, but privileged in some ways, because the city actually never shut down. There were clubs and restaurants, they were open all night. You could do stuff. It never really shut down. This, of course, attracted people. This attracted Bowie.
Well, yes.
He did a trilogy of fantastic albums in the Hansa studio by the wall. And that was exactly the studio where we recorded the two albums with Nina. So yeah, we realized that there was other interesting stuff going on. I personally never met Bowie during that time. We were
No, but
just
that must have been
crazy.
quite a kind of a blessing, really, to have someone like him, Fripp, Eno, and all those bands, and Iggy Pop sort of all being in Berlin at the same time.
I mean,
Because
there are lots of people who actually have time to go out to the clubs. I was in school and in the band. So for me, the club going was not, unfortunately, there wasn't much room for that in my schedule. There's, of course, tons of people who were in Berlin at that time and actually ran into Bowie or Iggy Pop. And of course, I would have loved, I could have just make up some stories to you now, but I'm a sort of,
yeah, so well, I guess because a little bit later, very sort of within the early 80s. I know a friend's brother who was 7 years older than me. Him and a lot of mates from Norwich all got a bus and drove to Berlin because they'd heard there was a lot of easy work there, and they worked a lot on the American Air Force bases and got
Mhm.
jobs. And they gave the impression, and then we visited later in the mid 80s. There was a lot of wealth as well, and also every Western band would come to Berlin, be playing big shows here in Europe and in England, but then would come to Berlin and be playing in small little clubs. But everybody kind of had to do it, didn't they? That was one of the, you got to play Berlin. It might be a small little place, but it's on the radar. So
Well,
so
the one place that was in the 80s was the place.
was that the
I think we
Metropolitan?
played, it was the Kant Kino
Ah,
in Kantstraße, which is named after Immanuel Kant, the philosopher.
yes,
um, and there was a cinema, and the guy who ran the cinema was also a music manager and sort of became a bit of an impresario by actually booking like the absolutely most amazing bands in their early phase.
yes.
So I saw the Talking Heads there. That 600 people would make this thing completely packed. and everybody would have to stand and try to kind of even catch a glimpse of the stage. And I missed a lot of these concerts. Like Devo, for instance, was absolutely legendary at that time. The Police was that was really funny because I saw the Police. They were just coming back from India. They were like touring everything. They had just 2 small trucks, and it was like when the first album happened, and I had found that album before anybody talked about them in a small record store when I was looking at a birthday gift for my girlfriend, and I saw the Police, and I'm like, that's a stupid band name. But then I saw it was a guitar trio, and I'm going, this doesn't look like your average punk outfit. And I listened to it, and I was absolutely smitten by them, you know. So I, of course, went to this concert. There were only 200 people there. I was sitting next to the mixer and had my legs over the cinema seat in front of me because nobody was sitting there. And they played their heart out. I mean, they must have thought, who the fuck is this guy, you know, having just sitting there? Because I wasn't dancing. I was like thoroughly admiring and enjoying it, but I wasn't showing this, right? But I mean, that was an amazing concert, actually, and it was really in their very early days. I think just after the release of the first album.
And was there another venue? Because I went to one to see a few bands called, is it the
Metropole.
Metropole?
Metropole. Yeah, Metropole is
Yes.
bigger. I think it's up to 2,000 people, so a lot bigger. But they also had a smaller club downstairs called Loft. So in the Loft, you had more the indie, the really
Yes.
undergroundy bands. You know, you'd see Einstürzende Neubauten in there, and you know those kinds of things.
Well, I
Or
think I went to see, I shouldn't admit this on air, but I went to see the Blow Monkeys, actually. It
yeah,
would be
I
deeply
saw
unfashionable, but they
Joe
were
Jack.
playing and we wanted to go to a gig. That's my defense.
Yeah. I saw Portishead in the Metropole and Joe Jackson and Elvis Costello. I mean, it's fantastic stuff.
Amazing.
And Lenny Kravitz, I saw in the Loft in the small place.
That
So
must have
that
been
was
about,
also
that must have been 80, was that about 89?
I I have no idea. I have no
Lenny.
idea. I'm sorry, my timeline is like
No.
it was 2 very crazy decades. And no, I was not on coke and I didn't smoke joints because I was also an engineer, right? So I I had to keep it together in every project that I worked with.
Well, yes,
You
absolutely.
know,
And during that period, I mean, that's quite a interesting crossover, I suppose. You know, in this country, there had been punk and then post-punk, and then we had Thatcher gets in 79. Then we
Mhm.
have, you know, all this kind of political stuff that starts to happen. We have the Falkland War, the miners' strike. There's Greenham Common. We think we're going to be
Right.
nuked, don't we? And then sort of musically, we start to develop that sound, which is kind of electronic sound with, you know, Soft Cell and Depeche Mode. And then there's the new
Yeah.
romantic scene. And then there's people like Sade and Working Wheat with that sort of soul jazz vibe. And then a
Yeah,
bit later you get,
all of this was huge for us. I mean, for me, for sure. I mean, I did, you know, it didn't pass me by for sure. Also, at that time, a lot of this stuff, I think Construction Time Again, for instance, was produced also at the Hansa Studios in the same studio. It wasn't the exact same studio, it was a different room in the same building. And Gareth Jones was the engineer, co-producer of that album. For instance, I think several Depeche Mode albums, and he became a great friend because he actually lived in Berlin for many years.
yes, my God, the Hansel studio is just so famous, isn't it,
Yeah.
for all those incredible stories. And then we had people like U2 and Big Country and Julian Cope, and then the Smiths, that indie pop world. Did that also sort of filter into your consciousness at that stage?
Yes, I mean, should I say opinions? I mean, I always hate the Smiths because I hate Morrissey. I love The Cure, so like there's a situation of like like a polarized situation with 2 bands from the same era, and I mean Johnny Marr is an amazing guitar player, no doubt about that. It's all about the singers, and I totally love Smith and I totally hate Morrissey. Sorry about that.
No,
Yeah,
it
so
does.
that it got that far into my consciousness that I was able to make this very personal and very idiotic judgment, so to speak.
So with your band Spliff, did you have a manager at this stage who was helping you navigate from?
It was the guy who was also who we found when we first played the very, very first very improvised gig with Nina Hagen Band in this was February '78, before the album was even produced. It was the first time we stuck our head out and went to a club that my mates had played in a lot, and it held about 1,100 people, and people were lining up around the block because of all this attention that Nina got, right? And after this concert, we there was this photographer who stayed around, and we started talking to him, and he ended up becoming our manager. He did a whole bunch of very iconic sleeve designs for us, and it was a pretty good marketing guy. He called himself Jim Rakete, and Rakete is actually his real last name, which is the German word for rocket. It's a very Berlin kind of name. And so, I mean, he was also very central for us to kind of keep it together after Nina exited. And then he came up with the idea for that Spliff radio show, because we had all grown up with not commercial radio, but BFBS and
Yes.
AFN, right? The Northern Germany, you had the Brits, which was BFBS. In the middle and south of Germany, where I came from, it was AFN, American Forces Network. And they had this kind of commercial radio format where they didn't have real commercials, but they had all these little announcements and jingles. And jingles were something that didn't exist in German radio. It was all very, proper and boring. And I don't know if BBC, you could compare it probably to BBC. I don't know.
Right.
But I mean, so to kind of make a show that was a in the structure of a radio show, like basically like an AFN hour and a half or something, and that was his idea. And again, he was a marketing guy. He also so he did all the booking. He did our management. He also then became the manager of Nena when Nena came to Berlin, and I started producing her and her band. And then Nena became so successful that that sucked all the oxygen out of the room.
Well,
And
yes.
and then of course this management company was a little bit, I think, didn't quite keep up with the craziness of it all.
Had Exmar Deutschland and Malaria, had those two bands developed by then? Were they on the scene?
Yes,
So,
I'm pretty sure.
did it feel like you were part of that kind of interest and community with, Blixer?
No, because they kind of looked down on us because we're the commercial assholes, right? Because we had a chart success with Nina because of all this, and our music was very eclectic, and it was sort of the bands are sophisticated, they really, really good players. Everybody was really good at their instruments, and of course the whole point of the post-punk era, with the Abwärts and of course Malaria. Of course, we had them on our radar, actually really, really liked it. But they didn't want anything to do with us because they were underground and we were in the charts. So, and then with Spliff, with the radio show, it was sort of its own thing. And then with the album after the radio show, we became #1 in Germany without Nina. So none of these people really wanted anything to do with us.
My God, you were pariahs, weren't you, at that stage? And
kind of, due to success. But I mean, this from Great Britain, the British music press, I don't know if it's still the case because times have changed quite a bit. But back in the day, talking about the New Musical Express, they would talk a completely unknown band up. Then the band would go into the charts and they would just smash them down. As soon as they were successful, they just love just kind of criticizing.
Yes, I know. I know. Also, I think quite a lot of people in the 80s. It was very divided in this country. So there was that kind of the right and Thatcher and yuppies, and on the left there was a lot of unemployment. So I think why there were so many indie bands was that there was a lot of you could sign on the dole, you could get job seekers allowance, enterprise allowance schemes. So you could just kind of claim that money, get your housing benefit, and just faff about. And some people faffed about in a band. And so that's why there were so many indie bands. And then every town in the UK, which is a tiny little place, the UK really, I mean, had an alternative indie night, somewhere on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you could get that transit truck and you could just drive around the country, go to
Really
Glasgow,
quickly, yeah.
Manchester,
Yes.
and all those places, and sort of go, my God, we've gone from nothing to a tour. We could call that a tour, and then we go to Europe.
But I mean, what an amazing breeding ground for pop music, and not just British pop music, but just like the human, the I don't know. I mean, I think that's where all these leaps forward are coming from. Even from before, of course, because I was just in the process actually last night of watching this Led Zeppelin
Oh, yes.
documentary, and I don't know if you've seen it. It's
Not yet, but it's on my radar.
fantastic. Oh my God. So of course Zeppelin was, Zeppelin 1 came out, I was 15. So, and I definitely listened to that. That was big for me. And I was actually, I became way more open during the 80s. And I would have kind of loved to work more with some of these people because, politically speaking, we were certainly not on the conservative side. Just because we were in the charts didn't mean, we loved Thatcher or the German conservatives or whatever happened there,
Yes, and just, I mean, I'm sure everyone asks you this. There was an American all-women band which called themselves Fanny, which was a bit of a strange one, and you call yourself Spliff. What Spliff? Is that the same as I'm thinking, or does that
Of
mean something
course,
else?
yes, it's a marijuana cigarette. But it was this thing. There's always this phase where a band wants to name itself, and it's always traumatizing and very, very bad. And the name is at least 50% of the success. Sadly, but that's just how it is. Branding seems to, even back then, was very, very important. And you go like, well, the Beatles is a really stupid name. Police is also a really stupid band name, but somehow they stuck and they helped. I really do think they helped the success. And in our case, we were thinking for a long time for something for the band with Nina, and we couldn't find anything. So we called it the Nina Hagen Band. And at the beginning, we were all fine with her being the superstar. And as the success progressed, band members became a little bit, I don't know, envious of that, or profile neurosis. I don't know if that term even exists in the English language. So they were a little miffed, and there was one thing on the first Nina Hagen Band album. There was a piece. It's called Heiß, which is the German word for hot, and it's musically actually very, very much leaning on David Bowie, on Fame by David Bowie.
Yes.
And there's a middle part. Lyrically, of course, it's completely different. It's very it's lascivious, if you could call it, and very kind of silly. And before the middle part starts, somebody says spliff, and it goes into the echoes, indicating that this is the moment where marijuana was being consumed.
Hmm.
And subsequently, we called our own publishing entity Edition Spliff. And then when Nina had left and we needed to find a band name, that actually helped a lot because, again, we had all these really stupid ideas, and then we said, okay, come on, we are the same musicians. This is really the same band. We've lost this amazing singer, but we are still the same band. Let's have at least one connection to these two other albums that we've already done, and let's
Right.
call the band Spliff.
It all makes sense. Blimey O'Reilly. That's amazing. And what was it like then once you got some traction on the first album, the tricky follow-up album, that can be quite hard, especially the
Are,
band deciding what to do next.
are you talking about Spliff now or Nina?
Spliff.
Spliff. Okay. So the first album was already this radio show thing. The radio show was an underground hit that never made it into the charts. So this was us trying to get on our feet. We did it with a radio show. We had a following. We consistently sold like 35,000 copies every 6 months or so. Never ever entered the charts, ended up maybe selling 250,000 or something. Then dismissed all the people who were the front people, who were all hired hands, so to speak.
Yes.
We had turned the whole principle around in our, trauma that we had gone through with Nina and her, her dismissing us and leaving and all of that. But it was really good because the band kind of established itself a little bit in Germany. We showed that we could do something, that we were good for some interesting stuff, and um, kind of, that was kind of the basis for what came next. But what came next was completely different because we dismissed all the people. We got ourselves a publishing deal that got us a little bit of an advance, bought a 24-track machine, a bunch of Neumann microphones, big monitor system. We already had a recording desk. So in this stupid rehearsal room that we had, we all of a sudden had a professional studio, and it was just the four of us. And we started writing German lyrics again, some English lyrics we didn't quite know yet. But the point was that we produced as long as experimental as we wanted to. And that created this #1 album. So nobody was looking for that. Nobody said, "Oh, let's now have a hit album." We were just going, "Well, what can we do?" We were a little bit more confident than we were when Nina had left because
Right.
we had done this other project and we had started writing lyrics and being more conceptual about everything. And then all of a sudden there was this big success. The follow-up, the record company didn't even give us time to think about it, because the follow-up came out 9 months after the first one, after that successful one.
My God.
And yeah, there were like one or two pieces that weren't quite finished from the first album that made it on the second album. And personally, I think the second album it's very good. All albums have, I don't think any of the albums that we've done are perfect albums. There's some fans who think otherwise, but I always think there's some outtakes. So that wasn't really the crisis, because we also had a very silly, very non-singly song, just like from the first one. We had this very silly song that went into the top 10 and dragged the album to #1.
Blimey.
And we had a similar piece for the second album. So that also sold very well. It didn't go to #1, but it also sold very well. And then we had really sold out, very successful tours. And then we took a break and said, hey, this was all simple music, but we're such good musicians. Let's show that again. Let's do something a bit more sophisticated, think about like some funky stuff and some, maybe even, I don't dare say it, but, I don't think anybody mentioned any other artists that we should look at or so. So we did our third German language album in the summer of '84, and then went on tour. And then that was basically the crisis, where we didn't sell as much and the tour was not a success. It wasn't full.
Right. Blimey.
And then we fizzled out because we couldn't handle that. We were just too much, we were too sensitive to just say, let's get that spirit back from the time when Nina left us, and just push forward anyway. And
Yes.
and then also it coincided with this insane success of Nena, and we had this studio, and everybody started producing other people, and so there's a whole bunch of work that came out of that studio during that time that we were all involved with, but the band itself didn't really find each other again.
Yes. So
There was
you.
not the moment where we said, now we're splitting up. We're officially never split up, but, never did anything again.
No. But then how did you become the producer for Nina at this stage?
That's because I went to CBS Records one day as an artist, right, who had with the Hagen Band and Spliff. And we had that studio already. And I saw uh, I guess I went through 7 inches that the A&R manager had, and I pulled one out and I said, "Oh, this looks interesting." And he put it up, and that was Nena's first band. They were called the Stripes. She was
Yes.
singing in English, and the song was called Ecstasy. And it didn't go anywhere, but I thought, wow, her voice is just really, really attractive. And I don't know, I just expressed my interest, or like I just said, I really like this. Went back to Berlin, and maybe 6 months later, I get a phone call from the A&R manager that says, "You were interested in this girl. The band broke up, but she and the drummer, who are a couple, um, are still under contract with us, and they're coming to Berlin. They want to live in Berlin. They want to look for other musicians. Would you be interested to produce them?" And I said, "Absolutely."
Yes.
And so that's how that came about. It was
My
just,
God.
I guess the record company thought, let's not send them to Munich because it's kind of, maybe they should get the Berlin treatment. I don't know. In any case, the other three musicians who joined were fantastic, and especially the keyboard player in terms of writing melodies and music, and the guitar player writing just amazing lyrics. And this is how 99 Red Balloons came
Yes.
along. Was
And
the
did you at
keyboard
the
player?
time think there was something quite special, the
Yes.
ingredients of it? Did you think, yeah, this
No
is
doubt.
this?
They also had this absolutely wonderful positive energy, which also then kind of fizzled out over with the success, right? It's this really sad story that every time, something becomes really huge. And I mean, this first album, um, which really went around the world and sold quite a few million copies, and the single was, I think, one of the most successful singles in Great Britain and also in the US during that year. Then there was a second album that was half the success. And then the third album, they said, we have to sound really international because we're now international successful and we're touring Japan and everywhere. So it has to sound more international. And my point was, I don't know, the thing that was successful wasn't thought that nobody thought about it being international. It was just
Yes.
you at your best, and with all your positive attitude and energy that you had. And I'm not sure if we should polish this too much, right? And it didn't really work. So and then for the fourth album, I was supposed to produce it together with Ricky Wilde, Kim's brother. You're familiar with Kim
Oh,
Wilde.
yes, yes, yes. Kim, yes, Ricky, yeah.
And
Yeah,
Kim
Kids in
then,
America.
yeah, and Kim, she way later in the early 2000s actually did a duo with Nena that was really, really humongously successful. I don't think in Great Britain, but in any case, so there was this connection to, the band wanted a British producer. They wanted, the people who produced The Police or Phil Collins and all, they're so high in demand, you would have to book them like 3 years in advance. So um, it was basically on the third album, it was such a crazy 5 month stint for me as an engineer producer, 5 months with like maybe 3 off days and
Yes.
12-hour days. And the band had fizzled out in a way that they hardly ever were in the studio together anymore. They came, one person came in early and stayed for 2-3 hours. Next person came in, stayed for 2-3 hours, and everybody had 100% different ideas than everybody else, whether it was
Yes.
for the sleeve design, music, and you could kind of see it. And I was unable. I wasn't that kind of daddy producer, or let's just say I was that in the beginning, and I was only like 5 years older than Nena, right? So it's not like I'm like George Martin or something. Or
Yes, you
Trevor
haven't got
Moore.
the gravitas to hold it
Then,
all together.
but I kind of had it because of the previous success that we had with my own band. And then they became very confident and they all had these different ideas, and I didn't have much of a say anymore. So I just quit the thing there. That was 1986.
Oh, what a shame. It's, yes, but then, to keep that sort of
But
success.
but the band did the fourth album, and it wasn't successful. They literally worked partially in different studios.
Oh, the
So
classic, isn't it?
so
Yes.
that wasn't anything I would have wanted to have anything to do with.
No, that would be very depressing. And
Yeah.
but Spliff, they sort of you also decided to split up in 85, didn't you?
I mean, as I said, we never really officially split up. We just fizzled out and I guess took a break, did other things, and then we were supposed to actually come back together in '86, and we're going to do an album, and we we got ourselves a British singer.
Oh, who
Yeah,
was
we,
that?
we thought, let's do something completely different. We got ourselves a British singer. His name is Lyndon Connor. He's kind of related, a little bit related to the Canterbury scene, a little bit too young. He's kind of my age, so not totally the Canterbury scene, but fantastic musician, really good sideman, played live world tours with Wham and all, you name it. Big artists. He would play fantastic keyboards. Was a great arranger and a great singer. And we did a whole album with him, but our drummer was on a solo thing at that time, so the drummer wasn't part of it, and we didn't call it Spliff. So this was an album that came out in '88, and it came and went, and you can't even see it now. You can't even hear it now on the streaming services.
Oh, what a shame. Is it Froon?
It's
From?
Froome, yes.
Right, there you go. All that work and it's just sort of been
Yeah, it
sort
was
of
2 years of lifetime, you know.
and in 87, that was, I think it was Berlin's, was it 750th birthday party? Because that's when we came to Berlin and went to the Reichstag to see David Bowie, and there was Genesis and Eurythmics and Paul Young.
I must have missed that because '87 was a absolutely crazy year. I had my studio at home. I renovated my studio at home, so I had like workers there. At the same time, my girlfriend was in intensive care, and so I missed all of that. What I did actually get was Michael Jackson the next year, '88, I think.
Right.
It was also in front of the Reichstag. I saw that concert, and Kim Wilde was the opening act. So I hung out with Kim again. Actually, this '86 thing where Ricky was supposed to join us to produce this Nena album, which then didn't come about. He pulled out and I pulled out also. But they asked me to come and produce with Kim. So I actually went to their studio in Nebworth and produced 2 pieces with them. And it was a lot of fun. And they wanted me to actually stay on for the rest of the album. And I really, really wanted to. But I had some other commitments. And Chernobyl had just happened.
Oh, yes, yes. Was that 86?
'86 in April. I was
April.
in Britain, and like it was the first and only. Well, actually, I did produce in '85. I produced a bunch of stuff for the third Nena album at SARM West. So I didn't get to hang with Trevor Horn, but a bunch of the other people who were.
Were you a Buggles fan?
Oh, very much so.
Did you
Not
like
so
it?
much.
What did you like the Yes album they did?
Well, yes, all. No, I mean, I wasn't so much into that. I also, what I really, really, really loved was Adventures in Modern Recording. That album. I think it might even still be in the '70s when they made that. It's a fantastic album. And
Right.
almost like I have the feeling this is like where they kind of where Trevor Horn and his people kind of found their stride, so to speak.
Yes, it was quite. I like the way things interact because I did an interview last year with a woman who was in a band called Dollar that was one of those very
Right.
duo,
Yeah,
and
I
she
know
was
Dollar.
like, and she said, "I really want. I've heard this record by Ian. I think it was the band Buggles, and I really like Trevor Horn. And he said, "Well, I'm not a producer." And it's like, "Well, have a go." And that was like his first ever production job was with
Right.
Dollar. And then
Right.
obviously we have Frankie, then we have ABC, then we have Art of Noise, and
Art
yes.
Noise was, of course, absolutely. I mean, there's hardly anything better. Or, of course, the Grace Jones.
What
They've
about
been brilliant.
Propaganda? Did
Uh,
Propaganda?
yeah, I don't know. This is this stupid thing with they're from Düsseldorf and we're from Berlin, and there's this competition, and they're also hipper than we. I don't know. I liked them, and there wasn't much contact. But you know what? People were really, really busy. They were really crazy, crazy busy. So it wasn't like, oh, we can hang out with this band and that band. And Propaganda would, of course, have been a band that I would have totally
Yes.
been able
Well, I
to
remember
hang.
ZTT Records and being very excited. There was, and they did that Dr. Mabuse, or
Right.
the
And then
single.
Claudia married Paul Morley.
Of course, yes.
So
It all
that's
comes
bad
back
for
to
the
the
band too.
Yes, that's a bad idea, isn't it? But it's all very Fleetwood Mac at times, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
It comes back to rumors
But
every time.
also, there's another thing. When I was in England with Kim Wilde in '86 in April, we took a day off, and I don't know, we went to a restaurant, and then afterwards we went to her apartment, and she played me the movie Spinal Tap, which came out, I think, in '82, and I had missed it. So I had no idea because there never was a German version of it. I don't think it was a big thing in Germany at all. It's just like language-wise too sophisticated for the Germans, the average German, whose English wasn't so good back in the day. So she plays me this movie on a VHS cassette, and about 30 minutes in, she hits the pause button and says, "Your English is pretty good, but do you have a language problem? You haven't laughed a single time." And I said, "Kim, you're a solo artist. You're not really, you have a band, but you're not in a band. I have been in a band for many, many years. This is a documentary for me. I have lived all of these absolutely absurd scenes, including the little sketch on the napkin. And then it turns out to be
Stonehenge.
a complete, yeah. So, I mean, not Stonehenge, but like something else that was sketched down on a napkin and completely fell flat on its face and stuff like that. So that was an interesting thing. So, of course, you have Fleetwood Mac, but I think you also have Spinal Tap.
Yes, and we also had there was something called the comic strip, and they did something called Bad News and More Bad News, and that was before, and that was about this band who were a rock band, and it was the same thing. The issues with the bass player, the drummer, the
Mhm.
guitarist, it was constantly sort of having fights and storming out and threatening to leave the band, and then sort of no, I don't want to leave. Anyway, you get the gist, don't you?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
of course, of course.
musical directions and suddenly wanting to do some jazz odyssey, which is like, oh my God, where's this coming
Yeah,
from?
right.
Everyone, yes. So everyone, I mean, you mentioned Chernobyl. What was, I mean, being, in West Berlin and being surrounded, and I mean, did that give you the kind of panic or worry at times? Because I remember hearing like supersonic flights and hearing bangs, like the glass would.
Oh, that's something that we grew up with because we were an occupied country. So we had these supersonic jet fighters, doing their exercises. Even in the small town where I was living and growing up, we had the supersonic booms, and of course the Russians would do them, love to do them over West Berlin because West Berlin was a thorn in their side, so to speak. So that wasn't so much the thing, but of course we were, if you had gone to high school and had like some basic physics down, you knew what radioactivity was, and the government was really not admitting to a lot of this stuff, and the people would then organize and test the food and you know, and release lists, what kind of stuff was actually really containing too much of the radioactivity. So
Yes.
what kind of meat, what kind like if you had like I don't know, game, that you would shoot in the forest. This was definitely not something you would want to eat, and certain kinds of milk and so on and so on. So, and it was actually funny when I was in England and I saw the clouds come, because it all emerged like a V shape from Chernobyl. So it went to Northern Europe and then also to Southern Europe. It definitely hit Berlin too. I'm pretty sure it hit Great Britain. The northern one also hit Great Britain. But if you looked at the news, there was this thing, oh, luckily we have now the wind blowing from the other side. So we are being spared, right? So, of course, Britain also huge in nuclear technology and huge polluter with Sellafield and all
Yes,
that stuff. Of
absolutely.
course, they needed to kind of downplay this whole thing, and this same was with the German government, and it was kind of the beginning of the Green movement, So the Green Party emerged from that, and
Well, yeah, absolutely. I know
sadly didn't really succeed with doing the stopping the fossil fuels. So
no, I
now
mean
we
that.
have what we have.
I know that's a tricky one. So as the 80s progressed then, and obviously, yes, politically then in Berlin, the wall coming down, what was your moment? What was that experience like for you living there?
Again, my girlfriend was in the hospital, and I didn't go and celebrate on the wall. I also didn't want to celebrate on the wall because I thought this is really cool. I really, really thought, okay, this is cool. If Germany gets reunited, I'm absolutely 100% for it. But this is going to be difficult. And nobody saw it that way. Everybody was like, oh, this is going to be super cool. Let's get drunk and, give East German people bananas. They look green gray in their face. They need vitamins.
Yes.
So, and let's give them 10 Deutschmarks as the welcoming money and all of this. I mean, I thought it was really sort of degrading for the Easterners, but the Easterners really, really wanted it. And now they're really kind of full of regret. Some of them are, and they're very sympathetic with Putin for whatever reason, and very right wing. And I think the reason for that being that the difference between um, poor and rich has so insanely been amplified, right?
Yes, well,
That
that's
and that is the real problem. And then you go like, well, actually, if you have the redistribution of money from the bottom to the top, which has happened since Thatcher and Reagan now, you want to reverse that. Basically, that's like a left-wing socialist policy, and we can't have that, right?
no.
Because the word is just already poison, Oh my God, we could do anything socialist. So, I mean, I never considered myself particularly left wing or actually very political or so. But now, being 71 years old, I'm actually more left. I'm kind of where I always was, but everything has moved so far to the right that I'm going like, oh, guess I'm now one of these extreme left wing.
Yes. Yes, it kind of happened by mistake, didn't it, somehow?
Just
Did
like I like the healthcare. I like yeah. I was like I went to a polyclinic in Nebworth, and I'm going, what? Why this British healthcare system is fantastic, and this was '86, right? And it was fantastic, and they've kind of run it into the ground, as far as I heard.
Yes, well, it's just everything's kind of creaking. Did the techno scene start to come into your
Yeah, that
consciousness?
came at the same time. There
Because
was, of course, hip hop coming from America. That was huge for me. Techno, not so much. And I got into things like drum and bass in the early '90s, but the typical techno, um, just a little bit, not too much. And then I actually then teamed up in the '90s with a guy who had been on the forefront of this techno thing. That was Johnny Klimek.
right. Did you
And
ever come across Mark? Is it Reader?
Mark Reeder, yes, just fleetingly, but Mark did a documentary about this whole time.
Yes.
Pretty good.
So he
Of
was.
course, doesn't feature us because of the reasons that I talked about earlier, because we weren't hip. But also we weren't in the techno scene. But Johnny worked with Dr. Motte, who's the guy who founded the Love Parade, and
Right.
Mike Van Dyke, who's is still a famous DJ to this day, and so did some pioneering work there in the late 80s into the 90s.
And musically, things changed quite a lot during that period, didn't like technology, but there was also the kind of the rise of grunge music. Then there was like that scene of Nirvana, then Soul Asylum, and
Yeah,
yes,
I think the 90s were fantastic because I really hated where rock music. I mean, I loved Zeppelin, for instance, right? I really did. And got into the electronic stuff and then but all the hair bands, like all this stuff that happened in rock and roll, with this
yes, Bon Jovi, Poison, Cinderella.
all of this are really, really, really important. I'm like, okay, I guess like I'm going up there in age, I'm like in my mid-30s now. Um, And then Nirvana happened, and Soundgarden, and I'm going, wow, now we're talking again, right? There's something completely different, and not only is it different, it's really happening. It's really great.
Did you
So
also get into music not music, film at that stage? Because there was like in the 80s, we had all those films like Betty Blue Diva, there was Wings of Desire, Vin Vendors, Paris, Texas.
yeah,
Uh,
Wim Wenders would have also not called us because he's more where all these alternative indie bands would be. So it's
but
like.
did you go to did you go to art cinemas and watch all these films then?
Of course, we watched. Jim Jarmusch is way bigger in Germany than he is in America.
Yes, this is true. There's Stranger
Uh,
Than Paradise and Down by Law, wasn't there, with
yeah,
Tom
fantastic
Waits?
stuff. Yeah, of course, I watched that, and then I had this crisis in like 1991 when my girlfriend then, on top of all her other health problems, came down with cancer and died in the early 91. So I was basically in this kind of weird lull, but at the same time, I had already decided I didn't want to produce other people's music anymore. I wanted to go back to writing. So then I made a solo album, and it took me 5 years. I was doing some other work in between, but I was really idiotically just perfecting this thing to death, and then offered it to Sony Music. CBS had then turned into Sony Music in '96, and they turned me down. And I had hung with all the film music people, and I didn't even bother offering this album to other record companies. So it's in the drawer, and since I just released a solo album with German songs, predominantly German songs, I decided to actually next year in the spring release this album that I had finalized in '96 for its 30th anniversary of not being released. So
Yes. So
I
what did you call yourself? What was the solo album's title?
uh, it's a German title. It came out on May 31st, and it's my name. It's just under my name.
Right. Got it. My God. So that's come out now and that's available.
That's available. It's not doing much. It's a tiny, tiny label. I did it all myself over the last 5 years. There are no collaborators whatsoever, because of where I was. Because I was in Los Angeles, I did all the film music, and when the pandemic hit, I sold my house in Los Angeles and moved to Hawaii, bought a piece of land, and more or less, my wife took care of building a house there. So we
Right.
did some kind of real estate development. We thought maybe we would stay there. We had a really nice studio, but until the house was done, I was in this very sort of limbo, very primitive situation. And this is where I did this album. And then I had the studio for about a year and a half, and then we decided, no, this is just way too boring, and nobody's coming, and we are going to develop early onset dementia. We have to go back, and since she's American, but she was born in Russia, and so both of us were like, let's just go back to Europe. So we went to Italy last year, and then just 2 months ago we moved to Barcelona. So we bought a house here in Barcelona, And this is where I'm now going to make a studio again.
Right, my God, you have whizzed around. Just but going back, one of my favourite films from the 90s was Run Lola Run. So you did the soundtrack for this?
Yeah, together with Johnny, who I just talked about, the guy from the techno scene in Berlin, and the director himself, Tom Tykwer. So we were a team, the three of us were a film composing team between 96, just before I left for America. We did his second movie in Berlin, my studio in Berlin. And then the next movie was Run Lola Run. And I had just established myself a little bit in Santa Barbara in California. So they came over. Johnny had his little techno studio in Berlin, and there and in my studio in Santa Barbara, we did the score for Run Lola Run and a whole bunch of other movies. So this entire sort of development into doing, at the end of the day, quite sophisticated orchestral music was mostly happening with this director, Tom Tykwer, who did
Right. My God, that was
Run
that
Lola
was
Run was the thing that kind of opened a few doors in Hollywood. I don't think we took full advantage of it because we kept going back to Tom and sometimes just spent months and months in Berlin because he wasn't able to travel to America all the time. You know, it's like the bigger the movies get, you cannot do post-production in Berlin or in Munich and for the music go to California, right? It's just not happening. So we had to go to Europe and spend considerable time in the 2000s in Europe.
right. God, that was quite. God, you had a good couple of decades though, working with Tom and
16
soundtracks.
years, I think. It was 16 years. Like I left the whole thing after Cloud Atlas. So the last thing we did was in 2012, Cloud Atlas. And then I had gone through a divorce and needed to kind of regroup and work by myself again. So that's what I've been doing since then.
Were these solo projects from 2012?
No, no. The Cloud Atlas was the last project I did with Tom and Johnny.
Right.
That was this movie. It wasn't a hit, but it's a really big and quite interesting movie with the Wachowskis. The Wachowskis and Tom Tykwer did it together.
Blimey, that must have been a big budget.
It was not a big enough budget. They budgeted it for 135 million, and they ended up making it for 100, which is a big budget. But the movie is extremely ambitious. It's based on a novel by David Mitchell, Cloud Atlas. It's a very fascinating book, and I think they did a very good movie, given the fact that they were lacking $30 million.
Yeah, so if only they could get it. And just going back to Run Lola Run then, did you get told, how did that project come together and how did you sort of manage to sort of work it? Because it's such a dramatic film that we all sort of loved back in the 90s and it's got this
Well,
very
I mean,
sort of...
there was a year before was Trainspotting, and Trainspotting also had basically a techno score. So you have Underworld on there, you know, and you have I don't know, there's a whole bunch of very famous techno artists, and I think he licensed all this music from existing albums and then
Yes.
cut his scenes around the pieces so that they were almost looking like music videos. And we knew, of course, we knew this film, and the idea was because we wanted a very propulsive score because she's running the whole time. Um, we were, of course, looking at doing something like that, but we wanted to do it slightly differently. Instead of licensing music from other people, we wanted to score it to picture and basically work. Although we were using that style of music, we wanted to score the ups and downs that went with the story, with the drama, with the intensity. And that way, I think this was what made the score completely unique because I don't think anybody had done that. I mean, every film composer does that, right?
Mm.
But whenever there was techno music in a movie, it had just been needle drops.
Yes.
In our case, the score was using the vernacular of techno music, basically, but it was a real score that was developed to the picture.
Amazing. Yeah, no, it was just one of those very spectacular films. I think there was a period, I don't know when The Fifth Element came out, with these very
This is all,
incredible.
yeah, early 2000s or something like that. I'm not totally sure. Yeah.
So you were
But
moving from, I was going to say, you were moving around from America back to Berlin at this stage through the.
I was in America. This was where I lived. You know, I had a house there, I had a studio there. I was married. I had 2 children that I raised there, and it was the difficulty was that Tom, the bigger the projects were, could not no longer, like with Run Lola Run, he was able to dedicate time and actually fly to Santa Barbara, come to the studio every day and work it with us. And then for the next movie, it was a little bit like that. And then there was a bit of a break, and then we did Perfume, the story of a murderer, which required a big orchestra and all of this. And we had to just go to Germany. Johnny and I, we lived in California, but we had to, for months and months, had to go to Germany and work the score with him there. And that's why, you know, I never completely lost touch with Berlin, especially Berlin or Germany in general, you know. So
Yes.
I always spent extended periods of time over there.
And it was Kurt Cobain's, one of his favorite books, wasn't it?
Perfume?
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yes. No, I'll have to send you a little clip of him being interviewed, but he gives this book, he absolutely raves about it, and he gives the copies to lots of people he ever meets.
Well, the book is, I think it really also do think it's amazing. And of course, what made it almost impossible to make it American hit is because there is no redemption at the end of the book or the film, right? It's very dark and it's very kind of gruesome. So it just lacks even your average American indie movie, you know, has this very typical dramatic arc where there's redemption at the end. This movie
Yes.
just mercilessly doesn't, you know, and that's the same for the novel. So it's really unique, and it's not very long. It's a quick read, and it's quite fascinating, I have to say.
So you're moving about. I mean, I've only moved a few times, but it is an absolute headache. How do you manage to sort of move
I
from
don't.
country to?
I don't. It's overwhelming and it's very frustrating. So, you know, I had that studio in Hawaii. I had it for a year, a good year. And then we decided, okay, we can't be there anymore. And since then, you know, I don't have anything. I haven't had a studio for a year and I haven't really worked for a year. And it's okay because I'm now, you know, like basically between age 70 and 71, I haven't really worked. And it will still take a few months before my studio is back up and running here in Barcelona. But that is definitely a frustrating thing, you know, and it really takes you out. If you're not like super rich, you know, they of course people who are so successful in the business that money is no option, you know, no issue. Like,
Yes.
you know, if Hans Zimmer wants to do something, he wants to hire 50 musicians and go around the world on a live tour. You know, can you imagine the road managing of all this instruments? You know, if I had anything remotely like that, then I would have 5 people working downstairs from here, and the studio would already be set up. But that's not the case. So
Does Mick Fleetwood, did he live in Hawaii? Was one of his places
Hawaii, you know, quite a few people, but they are, you know, Hawaii is an archipelago, so it's 5 major islands. We were living on the big island where the volcano is. There aren't that many famous musicians on the big island. As far as I know, I once met, what's her name? She's great from the Go-Go's, one of the guitar players from the Go-Go's.
Katie Valentine?
No, that's, oh my God, why? I kind of, I
The Go-Go's. Oh, look, we'll find it.
constantly, um, you know, follow her on Instagram, and she's fantastic. She's also a fantastic songwriter. She wrote some of the cool pieces.
It's Kathy Valentine, Belinda Carlisle.
No, Belinda is like the one who had the big solo career.
Jane
Jane Wheatland. She's in Hawaii. I don't know, one of the Grateful Dead is in the Big Island. And then there's Oahu, and Oahu is completely isolated from everything else. And then there's, Lanai, and then there's actually it's Maui. Maui is the next island, and Oahu is the one where Honolulu is. So there you have a big music scene with Hawaiian reggae and traditional Hawaiian music, very sort of, impenetrable kinds of music scenes. In the Big Island, there's no scene whatsoever.
Right.
No, in Maui, Oprah has a huge compound in Maui. Tons of very, very famous rock musicians have houses in Maui, but I don't think there's a scene, to be honest. It's just rich people who can afford to have a luxurious big villa on a Hawaiian island,
Yes.
It doesn't amount to a melting pot of interesting music, not to my knowledge.
And also, I mean, just coming back to making music, because everyone's back doing it, isn't there? Because I know I did an interview with the woman from Neue Deutschland, is it Anya Howell? She's just brought a new album out, hasn't she, as well?
I read about that, yes. I haven't heard it. And Neue Deutschland wasn't really very big on my radar, but supposedly it was a really good band, I hear.
Yes. And I know that Nina has got, she's got a UK live date coming up as well, hasn't she?
Nina Hagen? No, you mean Nena?
Nena.
99 Red Balloons?
Yes.
Nena.
So she's got a live date coming up. And I did an interview, funny enough, it was Ralph that I interviewed quite recently, and he's playing some solo dates and stuff. Have you sort of suddenly seen lots of people from your community generation who are still sort of out there making it?
Yeah, well, Rolf had probably a very long break. And I haven't been in touch with him, although I really, really like that guy. He's a very, very sweet guy and a very good drummer. Nena, on occasion, I have been in touch with, but also not in quite a long time, which has more to do with me being on the other side of the planet, right? But Nena, what from Great Britain or the United States, Nena kind of feels like a one-hit wonder. But she was not in Germany, absolutely not. She has a really steady career since then. And she's now, I think she just turned 65, and she almost looks the way she used to,
Yes, this is true.
She's aging extremely well, probably has a deal with the devil or something. And she's doing really, really good modern pop music. So that's, of
yes, I
course,
think
something
she's got a live date in the UK, I think, sometime this autumn. So there you go. And even Anya from Neue Deutschland, I think she's supporting someone like the Psychedelic Furs with Mona Moore. Can you remember Mona?
Yeah, I know the name.
And the album was produced by a guy that you probably know called John, is it Caffrey, who did Joy Division, Gary Newman, Blixer.
Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I know, of course, of him, yes.
Right. So I've just kind of been sort of getting this vibe that everyone is out there making another album and getting back on the road, even if they haven't done it for decades.
Yeah, to be honest, the thing with the road is not on my radar.
No, I wouldn't.
Which is why I'm not, it's a typical thing just because I never made music for money. I just need to make it. It's just, and I have a crazy big range. I have a lot of unproduced music in all kinds of style directions. I then 6 years ago I started writing lyrics again in English and in German. So I have much more material than I used to have in the early 80s, where we just kind of everybody came with 3 songs and we clobbered an album together,
Yes.
and then moved on and did the next album really quickly. So this is a totally different situation. And of course, the market has completely changed. And nobody can expect to make any money unless they go live. And at this point, I don't see myself doing that, to be honest. I love sitting in the studio and tinkering. So I could imagine some collaborations with people. This is the reason why I came back to Europe. Didn't want to move back to Germany. Lived there for a long time, 44 years. No, 40, yeah, 43 years. That's enough. 23 years in Berlin. I wanted to
Yes.
try something in Southern Europe. And I also think politically, I'm so unhappy with what's happening in Germany. It's like you cannot even believe how stupid I think this all is.
Yes, well,
The
difficult
fact
one.
that a heat pump, which is a phenomenal piece of technology, like almost a miracle of energy savings for heating and cooling, has been made a political issue in Germany. And not in other countries in Europe, definitely not here in Spain, you know.
Yes. Well, I just heard this week that a political party wants to bring back fracking, and
Yeah,
and there's a big thing against solar panels. I mean,
they
solar
want
panels is
they want gas. I mean, the Green Party was part of a coalition. They had one minister who actually really pushed in the 3 years that this last coalition went, really pushed for the energy transformation into renewables. And he actually made a lot of things happen, also in response to the war in Ukraine and cutting off the gas, boycotting Russia with the gas. Now he had to go to the Middle East and get gas from there, and so on and so on. But also really, really pushed for solar and for renewable energies. And it's basically unfolding in front of everybody's eyes how cool this is. And yet, the elections that happened in February or January brought back the people who are going to roll all of this back as much as they can.
yeah.
So it's constantly, it's kind of, it makes you go like, yeah, I don't know, the democracy is cool, but with these pendulum swings, you don't have the feeling that there's much of a concept going on, and there's so much corruption and so much. I mean, it's obvious that we have to get rid of fossil fuels. It's freaking obvious, and yet it's still a debate.
Yes, the debate. That's the hard thing to deal with. It's really not easy. And I mean, just going forward, you mentioned your solo album. So how long will it take to get your studio set up and operational?
Well, yeah, my problem is I bought the house. The house is really actually very cool. It's sort of it was built in the 80s. It has a lot of Bauhaus and Art Deco sort of elements, and it's really lived down. So it needs to be completely renovated. And it has a humongous room on the ground floor. Perfect for a studio. Just like I was looking all over Italy for something like this, but not in the countryside. Of course, you have giant mansions you can buy for not so much money in the countryside. I wanted to be in a really living city, and Barcelona is actually quite fantastic. So we just found this house here, and now we have to go through the bureaucracy to get to the point where we can actually even start renovating. And at this point, everything, all these cardboard boxes are downstairs in that room, and I'm unpacking them slowly to get at least my workstation back up and running so I could do something,
Yes.
not properly a studio. So then we're going to have to get out of this house again. Then everything has to be renovated, and then I can come and do the studio. So I'm still kind of trying to figure this out, but I think it'll be next year before I'm up and running.
Blimey, there you go. It's a winter project. At least the weather isn't too bad in Barcelona during the winter, so that's one good thing. And if people want to find your music, have you got a website? Is that the
I do.
best?
Like it's reinholdheil.com. So, but the website hasn't been updated in ages. So you follow me on Instagram,
Yes.
also just my name at Reinhold Heil. And I have a YouTube channel. I also released an ambient album, which is very, very ambient, very chill, about a year ago. That's to be found on my YouTube channel. There's actually videos for each and every of these pieces. And it's
Right.
all very sort of small scale in terms of the business side of it, because I'm doing everything by myself. And that's why with this album, with the songs, which again, German language, 14 songs, one English language piece. With the songs, I actually got myself a small label. So because I thought, okay, I can't do everything. And actually, right now I'm talking to a director who makes music videos. Because if you look at my music videos that I did, the two videos that I did for this album, I did all again, there's a whole bunch of computer animation, and I did all the editing and everything myself. And I'm really not a filmmaker, right? So this is all stuff that I got into while I was in Hawaii. I I developed, a penchant for doing the visuals also.
Excellent.
And
Well,
it
there you
and,
go.
and it really kind of it turns me on, to be honest. But I'm of course not really a pro in the visual department. So
No, but
you will see it if you go and look at it. Um, Let me know what you think.
I will. I will. And the YouTube channel, that's under your name as well.
Yeah, nah. You can just look for my name and you will find it. It's stupidly, it's Lava Zone 4 Records.
Right.
That is
Got
really
you.
dumb because I now no longer want to have that label. Lava Zone 4 was where I lived on Hawaii, right? So Lava Zone 4 Records was supposed to be my own label, and the ambient album was released on that label, and that's why the YouTube channel is called Lava Zone 4 Records.
Right.
But you
That's
see my name, and if you Google my name, if you do a search for my name on YouTube, you should find it.
fantastic. I think it's good. I think I've got the. It's
I
just
can
like
I can send it to you too, but yeah.
I think I've got it. This is good. This is good. Well, look, thank you ever so much for your time. And I'll have to, yes, because a few years ago I was very curious because I was obsessed with prog rock, and this guy came on my radar who it was because of David Bowie in the 90s doing interviews, mentioned this guy in a band that no one had a clue about. And it turned out that in the 60s, it was like the first ever prog rock band that all the audience were like people who then became kind of famous in the 70s. And this guy, I can't, it was a band called Clouds or 123. I'll have to send you the link. Anyway,
Clock
he's
ABA? No.
so then he has a moment where he's on stage, he's just very fed up, he smashes his keyboard, never plays music ever again, goes and gets a job, leaves it. Then in the 90s, Bowie's always name dropping this guy, and then he starts getting this curiosity, and I did an interview with him, and I'll sort of send you a link to some of his music that he did, but it's just like because you're a
Where
key.
was he from? From Britain? Also
Yeah,
Britain?
he actually from Scotland, but then he then developed this three-piece band.
Mhm.
Dave, and I did an interview, and he said, "Yeah, David Bowie used to just want to hang out with me because I was quite famous and he wasn't at the time. But they
So
have a
now we're
moment.
talking 1970 or something,
Well,
right?
probably 1968,
68,
1970,
yeah, yeah.
and then he literally just loses his temper, thinks I've just had enough, I'm not doing this anymore, and smashes his equipment and walks off. But it's just, I'll send you a clip because it's always kind of curious to see what you think of what Rick Wakeman once said. This was the birth of prog. This is where prog kind of started with this band, and from there you obviously get the 70s prog. But yeah, I'll be curious to know what you think of this particular outfit. And yes,
Well, I'm definitely the opposite now that I was when I was 20. I have wide open for anything that's good. I mean, and good in the most subjective way, what I like. And then, yes, I'm listening to pop music. I like Billie Eilish. I like listening to it. And they're fantastic. They're different. It's something new. I listen to hip hop. I listen to Radiohead. Of course, Massive Attack is probably my all-time favorite band.
right.
It's all actually very, very British. It's between like these progressive British people, and then kind of more the Miles Davis department in America.
Well, Kind of
Frank
Blue was
Zappa, of course. Oh my God, I forgot Frank Zappa.
Frank Zappa. What about Captain Beefheart?
Not so much. I mean, I know Frank Zappa produced him, but I was into Zappa himself. You know that with Nina Hagen, we met him and we asked him to write English lyrics for us.
Right. No, I didn't know that.
This was right before we split up in Munich in 1979, and we saw a concert of Zappa and his band, and went backstage, and there he was in his like very proverbial way, sitting there smoking a Winston cigarette in front of a little pig nose practice amp. And we asked him, and he said, "This is a really, really bad idea. Not that I am too lazy to do it, but you are so German and you are so special," because he was a fan. You know, he really liked that first album with Nina. And he said, if you come to America, you should be as German as you could possibly be, because otherwise, if you try to blend in, then you're going to blend in and you're not going to make it. You just have big blonde braids, and a dirndl outfit or something, like, to just like exaggerate or so. But this was his advice, and I think he was completely right.
Yes. Well, absolutely. I remember
And
always
later
doing.
you see, Rammstein. Of course, they get really successful in America. Why? Because it's completely different from anything else that everybody knows, right? And very, very German.
Well, absolutely. I mean, yes, that's what you kind of, as an artist, you must have that feeling, though. What's the ingredients, or what is it that kind of lines the stars up to make
I,
that
I
thing?
don't know. This I have
Because you don't know. I mean,
no, I'm actually, the funny thing is, I don't know if you know Rick Rubin. I mean,
oh
you know Rick
yes,
Rubin as a producer, but he has his podcast and, his whole tetragrammaton thing, and kind of postulating that people should just follow their instincts and do what they like for themselves, and then the success will come, or it won't, but the likelihood of success coming is the same. And potentially, if they're just being themselves, it might actually be more likely. See, just like with the Nena thing, then they want to become international. They do something that they think they have to do, when 2 years earlier they were just themselves, and that was really successful. So it's like really stupid. So I think Rick Rubin is completely right with this. And funnily, I can tell you, like, if you listen to any piece of music that was ever successful that had anything to do with, it is so not the stereotypical hit single. It's not done by a formula.
no. Well, it was interesting because I've been obsessed with Bowie. I did notice, obviously, we all noticed his 80s work was not great, and I think that was the one moment where he, instead of just doing what he really wanted and followed what he felt, he was almost looking like, oh, what's happening? And then sort of had a sound of those two albums, Never Let Me Down and Tonight, which just sounded like somebody looking at the charts going, oh, is that quite popular? I'll do something a bit similar to that. And so there was this real feeling for me that he, for once, is following, rather than just going, actually, I'm just going to go write this material on my own and then record it and then just say, that's it, that's what I can do, which he possibly did in his early years, though he can't remember anything about Station to
Well,
Station.
I don't know. I mean, as I said, the early Bowie, I was already so above it. I was so fucking arrogant about all that. Same thing with Elton John, and these people are, and, if you listen to early Bowie, early Elton John, very similar, really sophisticated piano chord progressions, a certain kind of, it's still a little dusty, old fashioned, like
Yes.
it was certainly not avant-garde. The presentation, in both cases, very flamboyant. That was what made it super interesting, and for sure contributed to the success. But they were also struggling. I mean, And I have to disagree a little bit because, um, Bowie was the chameleon, and the Berlin trilogy albums had a lot to do with Eno and maybe also with Berlin and the atmosphere there, and sort of trying to capture this kind of depressed, slightly industrial vibe that the place had. And then he just changed for something different, and he went to America and he worked with Nile Rodgers, and Nile Rodgers is it's disco basically, but it's
Yes.
Bowie. I think that album is still. I mean, his voice is just he could have done anything. Doesn't matter almost.
And in that period, did you watch Christiana F? Was that a film that came on your radar as well?
Yeah, I actually met Christiane F herself. Oh, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm so full of stories. I have to actually get going at some point. I met the lady who is Christiane F.
Right, who wrote the book?
Who, as a teenager, was a heroin addict and worked as a prostitute at Bahnhof Zoo in Berlin, and wrote this book. And then there was the movie made about her. But she also then became a musician, and she did a very alternative kind of very undergroundy record,
Right.
more along the lines of Ich mal Deutschland. I don't even know how good it was. I met her years later and had to thank her because Christiane F., the person, not the figure in the book or like the actual person, did a trip to Los Angeles, or I guess to the United States, and went to, it wasn't Wolfman Jack, it was, God, what was the DJ in Los Angeles?
Rodney.
Rodney Bingenheimer.
Yes,
Yes,
little
she went to
Rodney.
Rodney Bingenheimer, did an interview, played her own little single, talked probably about the movie and about her history and all of that. And at the end of this interview, Rodney Bingenheimer goes, Christiane, what are people listening to in Germany right now? And she goes, funny you should ask. I have that single right here. She goes into her little bag, pulls out 99 Red Balloons, and he plays it for the first time. It's not released in the United States. He plays it on his show in Los Angeles. The people in Los Angeles hear it, and they start calling the station and said, what's that? Can you play that again? And it develops an airplay, an organic, natural airplay in Los Angeles. And the people in New York, in the Black Rock, the CBS record people go, there's one lady who's actually really enthusiastic. She's in the publishing company. The A&R guy who I met later, who told me this story, just like he didn't care. He looks like a real idiot. He didn't want to do it. His girlfriend was the publishing girl. So the girlfriend goes, you have to, look, this is organic airplay. It's happening by itself. Nobody's doing anything about it. People are calling in, they're loving this. We have to release this music. They happen to be without, our German subsidiary. Why the hell are we not releasing this music? And goes, I don't know. I don't think this is really good. Anyway, it comes to a breaking point, and she goes, you know what? I'm not going to have sex with you anymore unless you release this friggin' single. He puts it onto a release schedule on a Friday, and his boss calls him into the office on Monday and says, why is this single not on the market? There's some motion going on and you haven't released this thing? And he goes, I just put it on a release schedule. And so his girlfriend actually made it happen by withholding sex from him.
Yes.
And at the same time, so this is all a true story. I'm hearing all of this from the people who were involved, completely independent from each other. So I had to piece this story together. This is how 99 Red Balloons' success in the United States started.
Wow, that is a fantastic story. And you could just, yes, that could be in a film, couldn't it, really? Let's face it. People were going, well, would it? That would never happen. But yes, it had. My God. Well,
I think now I've started, having more time. I'm starting watching all these documentaries. I think the music industry is full of these stories.
Yes, it is true. Actually, it's kind of just all the accidental things that happen that then, yeah,
Yeah.
that make it. But anyway, look, I think you must be going. But look, thank you ever so much for your time. And if you want, I can always. Oh yes, you're recording this as well, aren't you? So there you go. But yes, thank you again for this. I hope you know it's there. And
It looks like it. Yeah, it looks like it's here. Here, look, there's the waveform developing.
nice. Well, there you go. That's me. Right. Well, look, thank you again for your time. This has been amazing. And yes, I'll keep in touch. But I'll send you a few of those links I was going to mention
Yes,
earlier.
please.
And I'll keep in touch. But thanks for your time. And I'll send you a link to the show as well. And then
Yes,
you can go,
please.
oh, there you have
Thank you
it.
so much.
But look, have a lovely time and all the best for Barcelona.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. A massive thank you and thanks to Reinhold for giving me the time for that. This has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh, if you want to contact me, you can on all the social media platform sites. Also, all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.